And a developing story tonight, Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz says it was a mistake to travel to Cancun, Mexico with his family, as his home state, of course, deals with a devastating winter storm and countless ripple effects. He says he accompanied his family after his daughters asked to go on a trip with friends. Senator Cruz told reporters he did not want the trip to distract one moment from the real issues Texans care about.
The moment I sat on the plane, I began really second-guessing that decision and saying, look, I know why we're doing this, but I've also got responsibilities. And it had been my intention to be able to work remotely, to be on the phone, to be on internet, to be on Zoom, to be engaged. But I needed to be here, and that's why I came back. And then as it became a bigger and bigger firestorm, it became all the more compelling that I needed to come back.
Texas Republican Ronnie Jackson says this is not a good look for Senator Cruz.
What I saw was that during this time where we're here and our water's frozen and we don't have any power right now, he's in Cancun. That's what I heard. And so I love Ted Cruz. I think he's done a lot of great things for our country and for our state. But obviously, that's not the image that I think I would want as an elected member of Congress. And I'm sure that that's not the image that he wanted to create. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, not a good look right now.
Swift and fierce reaction all day today and tonight. The Texas Democratic Party is calling on Senator Cruz to resign or be expelled from office. Joining me now to discuss this is GILBERTO. He is the chair of the Texas Democratic Party. Thanks so much, sir, for being here. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
What was your gut reaction when you saw these images all over social media today of Senator Cruz in the airport?
I thought it was a hoax. I mean, I thought that somebody had superimposed his head onto somebody walking in an airport, and that was really not him, because I just could not fathom that he would do something like this in the middle of this terrible weather event in the state of Texas, with systems breaking down, people without power, people, freezing to death, people struggling through food insecurity. I never would have imagined that he would walk away from Texas and go to a resort in Mexico, Cancun of all places. And it wasn't until I got a little something coming out of the New York Times this morning that I realized that it was true. And when I saw that, I was totally confounded by his total insensitivity, his disregard for the welfare of the people of the state of Texas, his callousness for him to think that it was all right to go to Mexico while millions of people in the state were suffering through one of the worst weather events that we have ever experienced in this state of ours. And a lot of it because of the incompetence of the people that are running this state. And he was someone who, as a United States Senator, had the ability to do something about it, to step in, to take the force of the federal government to try to resolve those issues with his position as a United States Senator. But he walked away. He made a decision to walk away from his own people, and that is just unacceptable. I mean, I think it really means, after what he did at the time of the insurrection at the Capitol, where he incited a lot of these people to do this by getting up there with a straight face and declaring that the results of the election weren't where they actually were, and that there had been fraud, and that Mr. Trump had actually won this election, and fed all this information to these people, who then proceeded to assault our Capitol and attempt to murder people. So this is the kind of senator that we have in Texas, and that is unacceptable, and he needs to leave. He needs to resign.
And, sir, one other issue here that's interesting is that in the past, Senator Cruz has been critical of other politicians who have left town in the middle of a crisis. Most recently, last year, the mayor of Austin, who traveled to Mexico, ironically enough, as Texas was still in the middle of a pretty bad COVID surge. He said, hypocrites, complete and utter hypocrites, was a Cruz tweet about the Austin mayor at the time. In addition to that, Mexico right now is at a level 4 warning from the CDC, and the U.S. is warning people not to go there. So on the political front, the hypocrisy front, and the health front, it's just amazing to some that Senator Cruz has been in politics a long time, former presidential contender, Why do you think he did not understand, or apparently didn't seem to understand, how bad the optics would be from all of this?
He has no shame. But let's not forget who Ted Cruz is. Ted Cruz doesn't care about the people of the state of Texas. He doesn't care about the people in this great country of ours. He doesn't care about the families that are suffering through this terrible crisis, and even before that, the COVID-19 crisis. There's only one thing Ted Cruz cares about, and that's Ted Cruz. The best example of that is the way he threw his children under the bus by blaming his children for this trip, by lying and saying that the only reason that he was going to Cancun was to accompany his children and that he would be right back. It wasn't until the texts that from his wife were discovered that showed, in fact, that was not true, that it was a family vacation, that he was not even going to come back till Sunday, that he was even inviting people to come with him, friends to Mexico, to get away from the cold. But he chose, instead of being a good father like he claims to be, to blame it on his kids. This is the kind of human being he is. He has no business representing the great state of Texas in Washington, D.C. as one of its 2 United States senators. And that's why he's got to go.
And
he's shown us time and time again that.
Let me just step in. 20 seconds left. I know you called for him to resign. Obviously, that's something that's probably not going to happen. But do you think there's any long-term political damage to him tonight? 20 seconds.
I believe that Ted Cruz's political career in the state of Texas is over. I think Ted Cruz would have a problem walking into a restaurant in the state of Texas and having a meal that wasn't interrupted by people that were going to be asking him to leave that restaurant. He is an embarrassment to the state, and he is someone that needs to leave and leave now.
Sir, thank you for your time tonight. And certainly, bigger picture, keeping a lot of Texas in our thoughts tonight. We know it's been a tough stretch of days down there. Good luck, and hopefully we'll hear from you again soon.
Thank you.